Oh, I've never seen that before.
You've never seen record on Zoom?
I no, so I've my class some of my classes are recorded, but I've never seen it pop up. And like it asked me, it said like by like continuing this meeting, like you're consenting to being recorded. Like I've never seen that before.
Oh yeah, Zoom is hip with the times on consent and recording. You know how it is.
Yeah, that's kind of cool actually.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, just introduce yourself and tell me about where you're going to school and what you're studying.
All right. So my name is Jodi Wolf, and I am currently in my final year of graduate school at the University of San Diego in the clinical mental health counseling program.
Very cool. So, um, we are both students, so obviously everything we're talking about is just kind of like an educated opinion. I want to say.
Yeah.
Um, so basically, you and I have had like conversations about this many a time and kind of like speculation on society and what the heck is going on with Trump supporters.
Yes.
And I just wanted to get like your opinion on like basically like narcissism and projection and like why are we so attracted to like people that are like aggressive, um and kind of also just a commentary because I know that you and I share these interests on like the patriarchy that we live in. So can you explain to me like how would you explain like a narcissist or like narcissistic tendencies?
So first of all, so I just want to say, disclaimer, so
Yeah.
narcissistic personality disorders are actually like really serious diagnoses,
Mhm.
and they aren't given lightly.
Mm.
And so I actually recently discussed this with one of my clients, and I don't want to invalidate people's experience, like with, especially with their abusers. So with this particular client, she was talking about her abuser and like, oh, like I think he has narcissistic personality disorder and I think he has paranoid personality disorder. And you don't want to invalidate like what they've been through, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like those are carry very serious weight, and like giving somebody that diagnosis is something that, especially like if I'm not your clinician, like I'm not diagnosing anybody with that.
Yeah.
And so that's something like I recently had to explain to her, like, hey, like this is like, I understand that you've had these experiences, but at the same time, like he's not my client, and I'm not going to diagnose him with this without ever seeing him. Like that's just not ethical.
Mhm.
But that being said, narcissists, they tend to be very grandiose. So they think very highly of themselves. And as a result of that, they think very lowly of others
Mhm.
usually. And so it's like almost like they can't really do anything wrong, and their opinions are fact, and their opinions hold the most weight. And um yeah, and it's just very manipulative,
Mm.
I guess.
Do you think that I think that this is like a norm nowadays for people to label other people as narcissists? Like it's kind of like a pop culture thing almost.
No, it definitely is. And once again, like it's not to invalidate people's experiences, but I think that the word has a clinical meaning.
Mm.
And I think that when a lot of times when we use it, it's not in that clinical way. And so we can describe somebody as being manipulative or toxic is like a big buzzword now too, and I don't
Yeah.
always agree with the way that it's used. But we can describe somebody with those personalities without describing them as narcissistic. But I think for me, like, especially being in this field, I think that I try to be very careful about the way that I use clinical words. And so, like, one thing that we talk about in my program all the time is like the word triggered, and
Love
how
that.
it's yeah, and it's just it's used wrong all the time. Like, and so, but at the same time, it's like, okay, it's not being used clinically, but does that necessarily make it wrong, or did we like reinvent its meaning? But then when you are using it in the clinical sense, you have to take the time to explain to somebody, like your clients, like what this means in the clinical sense, because it's not often used correctly.
I use that word a lot.
Yeah, and it's just become part of our culture, and it's not, you're not wrong for using it, and it doesn't make anybody a bad person for using it that way. I've used it the wrong way too. And I just try to be like more intentional in the way that I use it, and I try to pay more attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, like with the narcissist thing, and like I feel like obviously Trump supporters would get mad if I called him a narcissist. And I feel like Trump in the media, he's been labeled so many things: racist, xenophobic, sexist, all these names. And it's like, I just wanted to get your opinion on like, what is going on with like the herd mentality of like, we are so like divided. And I mean, like, we have experienced this, you and I personally, like firsthand, like to the point where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna fucking write that person off now. Excuse my language. I'm gonna write that person off now. Because Trump's a racist. So
No,
go ahead.
yeah, I think I've been thinking about this a lot, like since you like told me like the topic of this podcast, and it's really hard. Like, even I was even trying to like think of like you said, like that educated opinion. Like, I was trying to use like my education in my field to like help explain it, and I was like, I don't even know that I have like an educated opinion in that sense. Like, I feel like um just I think that our society is racist. I think our society is racist, and I think that there's a lot of people who are working really hard to try to change that and change themselves and work on themselves. But I think that there's a lot of people who are stuck in their ways, and maybe even in denial about like these thoughts that they have. But then when you see this presidential, like, even when he was just a presidential candidate, he wasn't even the president yet. When you see this person, like, oh, he thinks the same way I do, he has these thoughts too, that means like, oh, these thoughts are okay, like I'm not a bad person. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense, because I'm wondering like why people are attracted to the way that he, even if he's not a narcissist, there's evidence he puts people down. He's a bully, he's mean, he's absolutely ridiculous, like absolutely like bombastic and like totally out there, like with the things that he says. So why are people so attracted to somebody so aggressive? And I think I can relate to your client in the sense of like, I was there too. I was attracted to this narcissist, and I think it was because it's like, oh, he's confident and I want to be confident. Is that like, I want to know your opinion on that.
No, and I think confidence is attractive. That's an attractive quality for a lot of people. And so I think Trump's like his confidence is absolutely ridiculous sometimes, because the things he says like is so like uneducated and just not politically correct at all. So it's almost ridiculous, like the things that he says with such confidence, that like I don't know if it's just like other people who also don't have that level of education. And I don't mean to like call people uneducated, but in my personal experience, most of the people I know who are fans of Trump, they didn't go to college. They don't have like higher education.
Mm.
And it's almost like that's he has that small town appeal.
Mm.
Like, and I don't know.
Yeah. No, I don't know either. I'm like the same as you. Like I'm studying the media and I'm just trying to understand like why the media and why people, like maybe it's the psychoanalysis of it, but just like the general, this is also a sociology thing too, but like
Mhm.
people are attracted to the craziness and like just like say the most ridiculous things and our eyes will be glued to us, kind of like I can't look away from a car crash, right? So I feel like arguably that's kind of like why.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I saw I can't even tell you the news source, but I swear I saw an article the other day and it was talking about how um people are like watching Trump more than any other president like in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because like both sides are watching him more because it's like that, like you said, like that train wreck, like you can't look away. You just have to like, what ridiculous thing is he going to say next?
Exactly. And how do you feel about him like not conceding?
I think it's terrifying, to be honest, because like we've talked about this, but
Yeah.
it's I just he's it's terrifying because it's not just him saying, "Hey, like no, like I'm still president," like being like that dictatorship, but it's also like him spreading this false information. So there's all these people too who are like, "Yeah, like he actually won." And it's but like there's facts
Mm.
like out there, like he
Yeah.
did not win.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and it's like I've seen a lot of like people talking about like, oh, they're saying like people there was like fraud like with the presidential votes but like not with any of the other votes, but they're all on the same ballot. So it's just like, yeah, there's just like this cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance, it's something that we also talk about. So it's like this, like when you have two conflicting ideas, like two conflicting beliefs about something, but
Mm.
you can't really see it, that it's like two things, like they can't exist together.
Mm.
Right. So yeah, so it's like people, and I mean it's a natural thing, and I don't know. We um my partner and we were talking about this the other night, and just like people get so emotionally charged when things get political. And
Yeah.
so there's a protest going on in my program right now, because somebody said something insensitive in a class about the presidential election.
Mm.
And yeah, and a lot of people got really upset, and now there's this protest going on. And the conversation where he said it, like they were already talking about the election. And so I was discussing it with my partner, and I was like, yeah, like I can't believe he said this, like blah blah blah. And he was like, yeah, but like he also he's like, I'm not saying he's right because he's not, but like he probably also felt attacked in that moment.
Mm.
Like because people were talking about the election and talking about the opposite view that he had, and like people just get so emotional
Yeah.
when it comes to politics.
Mm.
Which, I mean, for good reason, like it affects a lot of people's lives. Like there's a reason people get emotional about it, but there's so many things that get politicized
Yeah.
that aren't political in nature,
Mm. Yeah.
but like we've made them political. So like one example, like we were talking about the other night, was like Al Gore politicized global warming.
Ugh.
And like global warming, like in its existence, it's not political, right? Like it's science,
Yeah.
but it's become a political issue. And people will get so upset about it when it's science.
Yeah.
Like there's real research that you can look up about it. It's not an opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, going back to the cognitive dissonance thing, like, I'm curious, like, why, like, it seems as though, and it goes with the science thing. It's like Trump supporters, like, they believe everything that Trump says, but it's all lies and it's all projection. It's like everything that he's saying about the other side, he's actually saying about himself. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't know. It's just what, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think some people could be in denial. So the thing about denial is a lot of, like, the reason people get in denial about things is because, like, admitting that this thing is true, that they've like rejected and rejected and rejected, like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean to them? So for example, like in one of my classes we were talking about, there's another classmate, one of her clients was sexually assaulted by her mother's partner.
Okay.
And the mother's in complete denial that this has happened, right? And that's really upsetting to hear. But we were also talking about, like, well, she's in denial because, like, what does that mean for her to admit that the person who she invited into her life and her children's life, that he took advantage of her child? Like, what does that mean? What does that say about her? And so I think like, I don't know. I mean, this is just like a theory and I don't think it applies to everyone, but I think some people, like, if you like double down on like the Trump train and then all of this, like, things that have been said about him are true, like, what does that say about you?
What does that
You
say?
know? And so it's easier mentally for yourself to just deny it. Like, no, that didn't happen. Everybody's lying. Like, fake news.
And how long can people live in denial?
I mean, that's a person to person experience, I think. I mean, ultimately, like, somebody could live their whole life in denial.
Yeah.
For some people, like, at some point, maybe it just becomes too much.
Yeah.
Because deep down, like, if they're in denial, deep down they know the truth, but it's saying the words, it's admitting that to yourself.
Lying to yourself.
Yeah. So that's a person to person experience. It could be long, a whole lifetime.
And I mean, obviously I am not a psychologist. Like, I could not do psychology. That is an extremely difficult subject. But where was I going with this? Oh, I think it speaks to having low self-esteem, because if you look up to this person so much and see them as like a god-like person in your life, yeah, and like you say, like, you don't want to admit that you could be an ego thing, don't want to admit that you were wrong, don't want to admit that something this horrible is possible, like, from your, like, this person that you look up to so much, you know?
Yeah, and what you're saying, like, the back to, like, the confidence thing, like, and the low self-esteem, like, that happens in a lot of relationships that have intimate partner violence, right? Like a lot of times the abuser in the relationship, it's and so the victim a lot of times either has low self-esteem or their self-esteem has been lowered again and again over time by this partner. Like the abuser is manipulating them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and yeah and that's they still look up to this person because their self-esteem has been lowered, but this person, they're still so confident, right? Like they, like you said, like they're a god or
And this is another mainstream term that I've heard, but can you speak on, like, that's kind of sounds like what I've heard of, like a trauma bond? Like people are like feel like they are like bonded to this person.
Yeah, so I've actually, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I haven't heard that word or that term, so I can't speak to, I guess, like whatever the actual definition is. But definitely like there are people are bonded. So I think it comes down to, first of all, a lot of times that self-esteem is lowered, that the abuser has made the other partner believe that like nobody else is going to love them, right? Like if they're not with them, like they're going to be alone forever. And they do, like, I love you, right? And yeah, but like nobody else is going to love you, but like I'm special, I love you. And so there's that connection, but there's also this is especially common in relationships where like a child has been groomed and their abuser, regardless, like if they believe that what their abuser was doing was wrong, like even if they believe that what they were doing was wrong, they still got something else out of that relationship, right? Whether it was somebody who cared about them, and because that abuse isn't the only aspect of their relationship.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so when you take away their abuser and you're telling them, hey, like all this stuff that happened, it's wrong. And a lot of times, like the child, like even if they're not a child anymore, they could still be in denial because you're telling them, hey, everything about that relationship was wrong, right? But to them, every part of that relationship wasn't wrong. That doesn't mean that they enjoyed the abuse, but they got something else out of that relationship other than just the abuse. And I mean that can be true of even like a relationship where somebody wasn't groomed, right? Like they got something else out of that relationship. And it's when after a certain point, they can come to terms with the fact like, hey, I did get something out of that relationship, but this was also wrong. Like, right? Like those two things can exist at once. But in the beginning, when you tell them, hey, this relationship was wrong, like it's hard to understand that those two things could exist at once. Especially because like the people who love you, they're not professionals, they're not clinicians, right? So like so a lot of times what they're telling you, hey, this was wrong, and like they might not understand that other aspect of that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, so that's just going to make it harder. I mean, people that aren't seeking help, and you're in it, and obviously you're in it, and it's really hard to see what you're in. It's harder to get away from, and I'm using another mainstream, but the toxic person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so, I mean, it's easier to see things from the outside, right? And I think that's almost like, I mean, so we share a mutual ex friend, and and it's almost like that too, like, right? Like from the outside, like we see that situation, but but for her, like she's not seeing, she's on in the inside of it, like she can't see outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially because I feel like she doesn't have like a larger support system, right? Like her support system is all in it as well.
Mm.
Right? So she doesn't really have, I mean, I feel like the only people from the outside that she had were us.
Mm-hmm.
And then she like completely was like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this happens with like, I feel like I can't speak to males, but I feel like so many females like can relate to this like phenomenon of like, I see you with this guy and this guy is like clearly bringing you down, man. And you do not want to listen to your best friends. You would rather reject your best friends, somebody that you should trust more, because you have like this emotional bond with Joe Schmo.
Yeah. And I don't, I mean, I think some of it comes down to like the self-esteem. It could for some people. So it's like, well, like you don't really know what's going on and he loves me, and like, but also like nobody else is gonna love me. But I'm not gonna say that out loud, right? But like
Yeah.
you don't know like what we have. He loves me.
Yeah.
And I think I don't yeah, and I think that there's like a lot of times, I guess, with friendships, even with female friendships that tend to be closer than like male friendships,
Mm.
I think at the end of the day, a lot of people like there's still this one like deeper. I don't want to, and it's not. I don't even want to call it like a deeper love, but like there's this different connection, I guess, with your partner than you have with your friends, like regardless of how close they
Mm.
are. And
Mm.
I don't know what it is about like people that want to hold on to that
Mm.
instead of
Yeah.
there, or maybe, I mean, or maybe it's because my friends are like, my friends are going to be my friends no matter what, right? Like they love,
Yeah.
like my friends love me unconditionally, but like I don't know if this person is going to love me unconditionally.
Mm.
But like I need them to love me.
Yeah. And I think that this kind of brings me into like, I know your perspective on this, and I think that it's very interesting. And I think you're very intelligent and well spoken when it comes to like, well, everything. But like, I think society teaches us, like, we live in a patriarchy. Like, society teaches us young women that you need to get a husband and you need to have kids, and that's like what you do. And I think that also society like teaches men to be manipulative of women. And like, obviously narcissistic personality disorder is a very like rare case. Also, a narcissist isn't going to go like get diagnosed because they're a fucking narcissist, but like but like men are so like programmed because of the way that we were brought up in our society to like basically put women below them. And like I feel like emotional manipulation and emotional abuse is so like normalized.
No, it absolutely is. So actually one of my internship sites, I work with people who either have been criminally charged or most of them are involved because CPS became involved for domestic violence. And so I work with offenders and victims, which those are terms that the state uses for it. I don't really like those terms, but those are the terms I use because that's the terms that we use at the site because those are the terms that the state uses. But it's interesting because when I talk about what I do at the site, first of all, people always assume that the offenders are always men and that the victims are always women, which is not true. There's women offenders and there's men victims. There's definitely more male offenders and more female victims, but at the end of the day, they're still both. And it's also interesting because as far as offender and victim, they both it gets determined by the court or by CPS who is the offender and who is the victim. And so there's in the cycle of abuse, there's a honeymoon phase, right? So like, oh baby, I love you, I'm sorry. And then it goes to the tension building phase, so like walking on eggshells and like a lot of the behavior like starts again, so like staying out late, gaslighting, whatever it may be, and then there's the explosion. And so the more times you go through this cycle, the victim and the offender will start switching roles. And so this doesn't mean that the victim's not the victim, but it means that the victim does start taking on these offender, like what we term like the offender behaviors as well. And so at the end of the day, they could, in the beginning, like they could have been the victim, right? But in the incident that got them involved with the courts or with CPS, they got determined to be the offender because of whatever happened in that incident. And maybe what happened in that incident was that they hit first, and it's because they've been hit a million times, right? And so, yeah, so it's just, I don't even remember what the original question was.
Kind of like our society, it's kind of like normalized to like
okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So one of the interesting things too is that people always assume like, oh, it's just like a dude like beating the shit out of a woman, right? Yeah, like that's what they assume that the people are in there for.
Yeah.
And they're always so surprised when I tell them. I'm like, no, they're really for the most part, they're normal people who are just in toxic relationships.
Yes.
And they never learned how to be in a healthy relationship because our society doesn't teach healthy relationships. Yeah. And that's one thing my supervisor and I talk about is like how there's so many people in unhealthy relationships who don't even realize that they're in an unhealthy relationship because they were never taught what a healthy relationship was. And they don't see any healthy relationships in their lives. So they have nothing to model.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorites is Twilight. What the heck is that? That is a toxic thing. That was like our like generation, obviously.
Right, but we ate it up. We loved those books.
We thought that was like so awesome. Like Bella. Bella can't live without Edward. She's obsessed with him. They're obsessed with each other. Edward stalks her. She literally is going to kill herself if she can't be with him all the time. And we thought that was like so glamorous and romantic.
Yeah, like the epitome of romance right there. Like, yeah, and I think it goes back to the media and just these portrayals like that, like we're not even like, even the idea of like you complete me, or like the other half of me. I hate that. I hate it. You are a complete person on your own. And so that's one thing also that like I teach a lot about like healthy relationships, and that's one thing that I have a client right now who's kind of in this beginning stages of the cycle abuse, as in like she's left once and now they're like kind of back together, but she's like deciding to be back together. And it's constantly like with her, it's she's noticing that these aren't healthy behaviors and she can see it, but even when she talks about, oh, like maybe I will leave him, but it's like so I can find somebody who treats me right. And it's like, I get it, right? Like I get it. We're lonely. We're humans. We crave connection, right? But at the end of the day, like jumping from an unhealthy relationship into another relationship just like skyrockets your chances of ending up in another unhealthy relationship. Because we have to work on ourselves too. Like we have to be healthy people outside of a relationship in order to be healthy people in a relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like people seek, like, they think, oh, I mean, I can relate to this, so I'll just say I've had these thoughts before. It's like, oh, I'll get into a relationship. That relationship will fix me, because I don't even know what crazy thoughts I was thinking. Like, why?
Because I need love, or I need connection, or whatever. Yeah, no, that's very common. That's very
yeah, seeking a solution like outside of yourself in another person.
Yeah, and even like I think it's funny, so even when like my partner and I, when we started dating, like he was like my first serious boyfriend, right? And he was like, I remember a conversation we had like very early on, and he was like, you're so like comfortable like being on your own. And I was like, well, yeah, I've been on my own for like almost 20 years. Like, you know, like I was like it's cool. Like I was like I want you to be part of my life, and I would prefer you to be part of my life. But at the end of the day, like I'm not saying I wouldn't be upset if we broke up, but like at the end of the day, I would be okay.
I don't need you.
Yeah, like I want you, I do not need you.
Yes.
There's a difference. And it's really hard to get to that point. Like it took a lot of work on my own, like to get like past that idea of like needing someone, right? Like, no, like it's okay. Like I'm good on my own. Like I got friends, I got relationships, right? Like I think that you make my life better, but I'm still 100% fine without you.
Yeah. And that brings up two things that I want to say. The first being, we've known each other basically our whole lives. Like, I think you moved in next door
20 years.
First grade. Yeah, we've been BFFs since since back in the day, and you have always been an independent person. Like, that is something I've known of your character, like, from the first grade. Like,
it's funny because I don't see, like, not that I think that I'm not an independent person, but that's definitely not a characteristic I see of myself. But my roommates used to always say that too in college. Like they're always like, Jodi, like you're very independent. And like I don't know, and I don't know if that's just like how maybe how I was raised, because I don't know. Like I feel like
brothers
always like made sure like I knew how to do things for myself, right? And like especially like in my household, like not that there wasn't like a difference in how the guys and the girls were raised, but still it was like a lot of times it was like, no, like the girls are out there doing like yard work too, right? And like the guys are inside cleaning too. And yeah, and so I don't know.
It's just
I don't feel like that's not a word that I used to describe myself, but you're not the first person who's described me that.
I mean, like, girl, I've known you your whole life, and you've never exhibited any type of like codependent nature. You've always been like very sure of who you are as a human being. Like, you don't let other people fucking knock you down.
I think that's a facade. I definitely have not always been sure of myself and who I am as a person.
But you seem like a complete, like, independent, like strong person, and you've always been like that.
Yeah, I don't know, because see, so I had friends in college too that they're like, Jodi, like you just seem like you have your life together, and I was like, I feel like my life is falling apart like at any given moment. So I don't know what you're seeing, but like I'm glad that that's what you're seeing. But
I don't feel it though.
But like I feel like one more wrong thing today, and I'm gonna break down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's so funny, because I feel like everybody, it's like you see your friends see something different than how like you feel.
Yeah, I feel like like your friends like always see you in the positive light, right? Like they always see like the best of you, and like
yeah.
But it's definitely, it's really hard to see yourself that way.
Yeah, but also like what you were talking about, with like having a support group around you, like manipulative or like toxic people like try to separate you from those support groups, and they try to isolate you from your friends and family, and they don't. Yeah, go ahead.
And actually bringing that back to the Trump thing too, I think it's a lot of it is also like who you surround yourself with, because I mean, obviously we grew up in the same place, and I wouldn't say that I didn't have feminist views like before college, because I did, but I wasn't educated enough to like know. Like I remember the first women's studies class I took my freshman year, my teacher asked like, who considers themselves a feminist? And like maybe 5 people raised their hands, and I was like, oh no, like I'm not a feminist, like ew. Like, and then by the end of the class, I was like, hell yeah, I'm a feminist. Like, the fuck? Like, you know? And like, yeah, and it's just, it's really eye-opening to move literally anywhere else and like just get like different perspectives. And like, so my mom's family, basically my mom's entire family is like Trump supporters. They all live in the same small town. They all grew up there. They all lived there their whole lives. They still live there, right?
Yeah.
And like, I swear to God, like my mom is like one of the few of them who isn't a Trump supporter. And she's the only one who like went away from school and moved away and like, you know, like saw other perspectives and saw other, like the way other people live. And I think that's such, which I mean, that is a really like privileged thing to say, right? Like not everybody has that opportunity to like go away to school or to move away from their hometown. And I understand that, but at the same time, like it's still, there's still resources out there, right? And like we had this conversation with our ex friend about, and it was like, hey, like I have these, like I will send you these things to read, like if you want, if you're like really trying to understand where I'm coming from. And we all have that responsibility to educate ourselves. And that's what, so that's one of the things, the protest that's going on at my school right now, that, or in my program, that's what it's about, really. So it's about minorities having to do the education themselves on like multicultural issues and things like that, and it's constantly put on them to educate others, which is emotionally exhausting, right? But like there's resources out there that like are telling us the same things that we're asking of them, right? So like we can do that work ourselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And but you have to do the work, and to sit there and like not do the work and not educate yourself and then be like, no, this is the answer. Like I haven't done any research, but this is the answer.
Yeah. And when you live in like a bubble, and with mostly white people, and you don't acknowledge that other people, minorities, are experiencing these things. I mean, it seems like obvious because you can think about our society and think about how it's like, yeah, like we've grown up in a society that like tells us black people are bad people or whatever. They're all like, or Trump literally spewing this rhetoric the day before the election, calling Mexicans drug dealers and rapists. And it's like, I mean, I don't know. It's just, why don't they want to acknowledge how wrong that is? And I think that they don't want to, it goes back to denial. They don't want to accept that our society and our system is racist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, this is history, right? Like blaming like another group for the flaws of, and it's like capitalism is the one that's flawed, right? Like
Yes.
capitalism.
Yes.
But if we, for some people, like to admit that like capitalism is the issue is to admit that our entire country needs to be rebuilt from the ground, which is a scary thought, right? Like it's scary, like because if what we're doing is failing, that means that like other civilizations before us, like we like our country could collapse one day. And also like if this isn't working, like well, like what is going to work? Like so also it's just a stab in the dark, like if we try this, like and then it doesn't work either, like and not that that's a small undertaking at all, like rebuilding an entire country. So it's just so much easier to be like, oh no, it's this, like this little thing that's fixable is the that's the solution.
Yeah. And change is scary, obviously. I mean, Trump's whole thing was make America great again. Like, let's go back to the days when women didn't speak their minds and Black people were segregated from us because we profited off of their free labor. Yeah.
And I think that also, like make America great again. And it's like minorities like know that America was never great, right? Like America was built on the backs of slaves. And to think that like it was our founding fathers like who built the country is a joke. But it's also the story that we've been fed our entire lives. Like history books, like we like to soften that blow a little bit, right? Like and like so it's also like interesting because if like we're not even being taught like real things, right? So then it's also, I don't know, it's also like if I'm just like now like thinking like, is that also why people have like trouble with this, is because we've been telling the same lie for so long that like they believe it.
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, if that's a lie, first of all, what else is a lie? And then it's like, well, if that's a lie, then well, like my father or like my grandfather or my parents or whatever is the one who taught me that. So are you telling me that they lied to me? Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously racism is taught. And it's hard. People get so emotional with the Trump thing because their parents, you know, taught them this certain thing, and you put your parents up on a pedestal and you can't accept that your parents are wrong. You're emotionally, oh, now you're attacking my, like, I am fucking like guilty of this. If you start attacking me and my beliefs in Bernie Sanders, you're attacking me and my dad now. And I'm going to get emotionally charged, and I feel like you're telling me that I'm stupid. Like, why do we jump so quickly from like point A to point B with that? I'm definitely guilty of it.
That comes right back to that emotional, like, politics it's so emotional for people.
Yeah. And I think that Trump has successfully played the media in a way to make us emotionally charged and divided, and just the hatred. Because I feel like it wasn't like this before, but maybe I'm remembering it wrong. I don't know.
I feel like, no, I think it probably was like this before, like, because history repeats itself, right? Like, it probably was like this before, but I think that Trump's like specific brand of, I don't even know what to call it, whatever it is he's doing, I think it's drawn a lot more attention to it, and it's made it more obvious. And so now we're seeing it, but I mean, I guarantee you, like, it's not a new thing. But it's much more obvious now. And like I don't know, like, I couldn't give you an example of something like in the past that's like similar to it. I just, like, my instincts just saying like it's probably not new, but like it's so obvious now, and we're so much more divided than, at least it feels like we're more divided than we have been. And
I mean, obviously when we had Obama, like, it was our side winning, so we felt like, oh, everything's great. Like, we have a Black president, we love Obama, he's like great, he's like, but I mean, we weren't on the losing side. So now we got a taste of that medicine with Trump as president for some reason. It's just like, that was the most horrible nightmare like ever. But they obviously, so many people want 4 more years of it, and they're eating it up.
Yeah, I think that's what's so terrifying for a lot of people. And like the fact that, like, I think a lot of people expected that after the 4 years that we've had, that people would like come to their senses in like a way and be like, okay, like we're not voting for Trump again. But it was still such a close race that, like, it's kind of scary, but it also, that just goes to show, like, we are a racist country and a society. And like we pretend we're not, but we are. And almost 50% of us said that these things are acceptable.
Ugh.
And I mean, it is disgusting, but also it's, when you think about it, it's not that surprising, right? Because we said all these things that, like, once again, like, it's very obvious when Trump has done it, but he's not the first person to do he's not the first person to rape somebody, right? And like, we've made exceptions for like people in the past for this, or like swept it under the rug. And he's not the first one to be racist, and we've made exceptions and we've swept it under the rug. And so it's just a reflection. Like, Trump is just a reflection of our society.
Yeah. Yep. I know that's very insightful, but it's also like very scary.
No, it's terrifying.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me to like the like last question I kind of wanted to wrap this up with was like, how detrimental do you feel it is to like a person's mental health to have like Trump as like a role model in our society?
Oh, awful. Awful. So going back to like the protests like going on at my school, so there was a lot of people who were very scared for their lives and for their rights. So this happened last Thursday, so it's after election day, but like we still didn't know who had won, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, and so there's a lot of people who were legitimately terrified for their lives and for their rights. And a lot of people with like marginalized identities. And yeah, and it's scary. And there's people who like I mean as a woman, like, yeah, there's rights that like I'm scared are going to be taken away, but there's but I'm at the end of the day, I'm still white, right? So
Yeah.
like not that I'm not scared that some rights are being taken away, but I less rights maybe
Mm.
are like going to be taken away. Like there's some people who that's legitimately what's at the front of their mind all the time
Mm.
is like, hey, I have all these things going on. Oh, and also like my marriage might be invalidated.
Mm.
Like,
No, they yeah.
or I like I'm gonna get deported or
Yeah.
because um especially like with where my school is located, like we have a lot of immigrants or people whose families are immigrants.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, like I have all these things to do, but also my family like could get deported. I could get deported. Like all these different things like that like they're constantly having to think about while also living their lives. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yes, it absolutely has a huge detrimental effect on a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, just growing up like in our society and then seeing Trump become the president, seeing so many people like love him and support him and just like blindly like follow everything he says. I mean, that's just like perpetuating like I first of all, I can't imagine growing up as a black American, but as a woman, I mean, I feel like if I was raped, nobody would believe me. Like I feel like that is like and like growing up as a woman, like as a girl, I feel like I've been taught that like women are less than men. So it's like I can't imagine like what that does to somebody's like psyche being a minority. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like and yeah, so like yeah, like what you're saying. So like being a woman, like yeah, we still feel that.
Mm,
Like yeah, like not being held to the same level that like men are held. But
mm,
yeah, could you imagine being a minority woman or a minority in general, like just being told that like you're not even like a whole person
yeah.
almost. Like
Yeah.
that you are valued less than somebody else
Yeah.
purely because of the color of your skin.
Or if something bad happens to you or your family, if you get fucking murdered, there's nobody's going to listen to you or do anything about it. That's
Yeah,
horrifying. I can't imagine living in that fear. Like I already
that's
feel like I live
yeah,
in
like
fear.
living like that like every day. Like that's something that's going on in some people's minds all the time.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's like it's out of a horror movie. I can't even like, I have to laugh because it makes me so uncomfortable to even like try to wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know, man.
yeah. But this was very insightful. Anyways,
We kind of got off topic sometimes, but it was a good conversation.
no, I mean, I think that like I knew that like your voice would really help like round out like my theory of like why people are attracted to this behavior in the media, but also like psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yay! Well, do you have any closing points before I end this recording?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you, Jodi. I'm gonna stop recording now.
Okay.